You know, one of the first questions you get asked as a student when you attend university is, what's your goal? What is it that you're after? And so naturally, you're thinking about this, right? You're asking, what's the biggest goal most people have? Now, I used to think it was happiness, success, legacy. But the more people I talk to, students, parents, professionals, artists, strangers, the more I realize something really strange. Most people don't know. See, the world is changing every single day, and we're all on this bullet train to who knows where. Distraction is taking over, updates, new things, the latest AI breakthrough. And by the way, who here is tired of talking about AI? Oh, I thought you guys owed AI money. But despite that, because to me, the hype surrounding artificial intelligence is so artificial. Because it's not about tech anymore. It's about who uses it, who controls it, who can win with it, which dictator can play with it. And don't worry, I'm not here to bore you. This talk is not about AI. But AI represents the enemy of this talk, which is speed. Speed is the enemy of progress because it often gets confused for direction. See, motion is an activity, but direction is purpose. And so often in our lives, we skip hard conversations, we round off details, and we finish things really quickly, but we don't grow. And so what's the alternative? We must slow down. We must ask better questions, and we must not just think faster, we must think deeper. So how? Well, there's two things that you have to understand: missions and goals. See, your mission is your grand purpose in life, right? It's the thing that makes you stand out from the crowd. The goals, though, are the commitments you make to you, yourself, and to others. Think about it as the connectors for your mission. For example, my mission is I'm a storyteller. But my ultimate goal today is I'm committed to helping each and every one of you be able to do more than you thought you could ever be able to do. And then I get to tell those remarkable stories after. And so let me ask you your first question. What's your mission? Think about that. I implore you to think about that because it's going to become so fundamental to all the ideas that we talk about. Because once you can figure out what your mission is, your next goal is really simple. And we all have it in common, which is to become as effective as possible with serving your mission. I know that's a mouthful. I'm going to say it one more time. Become as effective as possible at serving your mission. Because that's what life is built on. Becoming the kind of people who can do what we can do, what we're here to do, and to connect with those around us. And so, how? Well, here's where my role comes in. I'm a director, and I work with actors. And what I've learned from directing applies to everyone because we're all performing for somebody. And I know there's someone in the audience saying, I'm not performing for anybody, but you are. You perform for your family, your friends, your coworkers. Heck, some of you guys are performing for your in-laws. And so because of that, I believe it's our duty. Yeah, you can laugh, you're allowed. It's our duty to perform well. And I'm committed to helping actors move through scenes and not settle for mediocre performances. I'm committed to helping actors know the difference between just giving and being a giver. And I want us all to perform at our best because it makes the world a better place. Because actors come from the most interesting backgrounds: business people, bartenders, single moms, single dads, retired people, law enforcement, students, parents. Who else can I pick on? The occasional nepotism baby. But despite that backstory, skill, inheritance, all of it, an actor could still show up to work, and the second the pressure hits, they get nervous. They think, don't mess this up. And nervousness is not a problem, guys. Nervousness just means you care. The problem is when nervousness turns into taking, and it starts taking from the performances. And so I have a very important job as a director. I protect performances. And there are two things in my experience that I found that stops people from performing well. First, they forget what they're giving. Giving is the core of all great performances. Behind every action, there should be a beautiful and meaningful intent to give something real, right? And this idea applies, you guys know this to be true in your own life, right? When you give the things you care about, your work, your schoolwork, your pain, your purpose, your faith, whatever it is, giving fundamentally connects us, right? And so when actors do that, it's a problem. Second, they try to guess what I want. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather have a gift from someone who guessed what you wanted or someone who knew what you wanted, right? So when actors do this for me, it's a trap because my job is to give the best story possible to the audience. And if actors are only performing for me, the director, they start taking and they're not serving anyone. And so how do you solve this problem? Well, I create a process that exists to push actors to grow and give performances that should serve the mission of the scene, which should be to give the audience something real. It's called the giving actor. And so let me ask you that question one more time. How do we become as effective as possible at serving our mission? How do we become as effective as possible at serving our mission? not to please the director, but to serve the bigger story. Because remember, acting is not about scripts or cameras or takes. It's about learning how to give. And so let me give you the first steps. The first step is embrace vulnerability. Vulnerability establishes a connection. There's something I say to every actor the first time we work together. I say, hi, my name is Titus Rhodes, and I'm honored to be your director. I want you to know I'll be walking with you every step of the way. I promise to care for you not only as an actor, but as a human being. And I hope that we create a space of honesty, trust, and generosity, where our performances are not about taking, but about giving. Now, that's a really corny thing to say to someone's first time on set, but it's also the truest thing because I mean it. Because when I choose to become vulnerable first, the actors can become vulnerable too. And so I took this a step further. I created a rehearsal exercise where I would separate the actors from the crew. And basically I would pair up scene partners working in the same scene. One is person A, the committed listener. The other is person B, the committed speaker. And basically in my little chair, I would create this little talk where I would ask them questions. And we go through a few prompts and each speaker gets up to 2 minutes. And at first it's very awkward to be vulnerable. But over time, they open up because vulnerability fundamentally is being honest about our own personal limitations. It's admitting we don't know. It's admitting we don't have all the answers, and it's dropping the armor. And it matters on set because on set, you spend all day with people. And if you can't even be vulnerable with the people you care about, your family, your friends, whoever, don't expect yourself to show up as a giving person on command. Because if you can't even allow yourself to be seen, you can't truly give anyone anything. And so, where did I learn this? Well, I practiced it doing it at a seminar, and it honestly humbled me. It really did humble me. Because I'm the guy who loves to talk, right? I mean, look at me now. Like, come on, let's be real. Like, I love to hear myself talk. I'm vulnerable. And so, but when you're listening, you start relating. You attach your own experience. And that's the key. That's where you build connection. You know, it's easy just to be purely subjective, just, running your mouth. But when you're listening, you step outside yourself and the focus can shift to someone else. And that's something we take for granted because it's the first step to giving, because it's giving our attention. And it's reasonable to think that vulnerability is hard. It is. But like anything that is hard at first, I promise you it gets easier with practice. You must practice giving. Step 2 is to rebuild. When you spend years avoiding vulnerability, you won't suddenly just try it and become brave. You must rebuild your mindset. And part of the reason for this is simple. Sometimes when you're vulnerable, the worst things can happen. And I call those moments disruptions, right? Because vulnerability will put you at risk. But if you want any sort of reward, you must be willing to risk something. And so, when a family member passes, or a relationship breaks, and when life gets messy, for an actor, it's still the same system, right? That little smaller stakes, but really a lot of us just don't have a great take. And I call those moments the disruptions between takes. Because naturally your mind is going to fight against this, right? It's going to fight to say, don't be vulnerable. It's going to fight to say, not to give the raw, honest version of who you are, but I encourage you to stay in the vulnerability. Let me show you why. Not too long ago, I wrapped a film, and it was a script I spent a year writing. And by the time we said, that's a wrap, we had cut over 30% of that script. There's roadblocks everywhere. And we've all experienced this in our own life, right? Let's do a little Q&A. Students, have you ever had a moment where you studied so hard for a test and you still failed? Forgot there's JCPenney people. But have you ever... But really, have we ever had moments in our life where we've really struggled and we just didn't do well? Here's another one. How many of us had a heartbreak in our life? How many of us have struggled, right? How many of us woke up in the middle of the night to, we need to talk? I'm just being honest. But, the truth is, how many of us have checked our phone recently and seen the climate of our country, seen the climate of internationally, and wondered what's going to happen next? How many of us are scared? And the truth is we all have disruptions. And for me, this planning got disrupted. And the film is about this woman, and she's brutal to herself, honestly. A woman who hates the world. And the actor playing this woman, I could tell that this role was playing it was stressing her out. And she was afraid to admit it to me, maybe. She walks up to me, and in between, right before we started one of my little setups, we had a quiet voice, and she was nervous, and her character has this moment in the film where it basically has this climax of surrendering. This moment where they raise their hand up and they basically repent about all the wrong they ever did in their life. And that's a powerful thing. And the negativity I could see from this role was overwhelming us. It was overwhelming. Everyone said it was hard to work on it, but it was hurting her especially. And for me, it was hurting me. And sometimes the negativity can overwhelm us, right? And so I talk, and I didn't give her a pep talk. I'm not corny. But I asked her 2 clean questions. I said, how much of this character could be you? And where does this show up in your own life? And that's a serious question. And by no means was I trying to attack this woman or hurt this woman. I simply invite all of us to notice the patterns that we fall into on stage and in life. Because the way we solve disruptions isn't simply by muscling through it. It's by stepping back far enough to see it clearly. You know, I saw a really good quote the other day. Researchers say you understand an explosion better from far away. Does anyone know why? Because you're not dead. That's my job as a director. I watch for the moment an actor is standing in the disruption. Because when you're standing in it, it's hard to think. So what did we do? We returned back to the question. We talked, we worked, and the performances became extraordinary. Another actor. In the scene, he was playing this club owner, and his character was an impatient man. And, you know, he was also a dad, a man with a son. And I asked him, in between one of my exercises, I asked him a question again. It was funny because we were laughing together. And I say, what does impatience cost your character's life? And he was laughing, and he stopped. And a tear rolled down his face. And he began to talk to me about his son, about how hard he was on him, how he wished that relationship didn't get costed by that impatience that he's facing in this role. And that's powerful. That's the fear. That's the disruption I keep talking about, the patterns that we fall into in life. But what's so amazing about this man is that he didn't let that control him. He returned back to the question, and he stepped back, and he saw it. And he said, after today, Titus, I'm going home a better father. I'm going to go home and love my kids. I'm going to go home and not let impatience ruin a relationship. And what did I do? Was it because of my question? I don't really think so. I think I just gave him the opportunity to have the permission to say what he already knew was true. Because that's the paradox, right? Life can be difficult. Trials can be harmful, but they're not solely hurtful. Difficulty can be the refining agent, and disruptions can often mature us, and these moments shape our characters and who we are today. And these don't just push us off course, but they often push us closer to our missions and carve us into the people who can actually carry them out. And so, 10 years ago, I was being shaped, and I didn't even realize it. I was a student in the classroom, and my teacher, who happened to be my dad, had a tradition called Fun Fridays. And it was a time when our 5th grade class could watch something different, something inspiring. You know, an art video, a short film, something unique. And so one day he walks up in the beginning of the class and he asked me a question. He says, hi, class, what do you guys want to watch today? And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, thinking about this video I saw on my mom's phone, and I'm spoiled, so I raise my hand first and I say, Dad. And I asked a question that every 5th grader wants to watch. I said, Dad, can we watch a TED Talk? And that day, surrounded by a group of 10-year-olds, we watched What Makes a Hero by Matthew Winkler. And I didn't realize it, but that video was the catalyst that made me a director. Because it taught me that you, me, all of us are all part of this bigger story that connects us. And that day, I watched that video every single night before I went to bed, writing stories till 8 p.m., past my bedtime, and I would go and run them around, and I would post them on my school bulletin board, these stories that I would write constantly all throughout the day. That's the real date of these are the real stories from 10 years ago. Teachers would take them down and grade them, and I never got past a C, but they would say, keep going. So I was like, yeah, be a director. If it wasn't for those stories, I wouldn't be where I am today. Why does any of that matter? Why does it matter that I was vulnerable enough to watch a YouTube video and I took the time to rebuild myself? Because of your last step, act. See, most people think they're stuck because they're scared, but the truth is you're stuck because you never moved. And actors do this all the time. They overthink. They forget the scene isn't in their brain, it's in their body, it's in their voice, it's in their truth. Even in your own life, right? If you live entirely in your own head, all you can hear is your own fear. But when you choose to step out and move with purpose, something shifts. You show up more present, more giving, and giving becomes a habit. So let me ask you a question I ask all my actors the first time we work together. How can you be a giver in this moment? Think about that in your own life. How can you be a giver in your relationships and everything that you do? Give truthfully even when it's hard. And when disruption hits, as it always will, don't flinch, don't be surprised. Choose to embrace vulnerability. Take the time to rebuild and act out your mission. And when you do that, you become a giving actor, not a perfect actor, an actor who is more present, more generous, an actor who's not afraid to be seen, an actor who's not defined by the disruptions between takes. And so I gave you time. Let's see if you guys were paying attention. 2 points. What's your mission? Right? Because we can't control every disruption that happens in our world, but we can choose this, our next choice. What we give to, what we serve, what we care about will ultimately lead us to become as effective as possible at serving your mission. And then you become a giving actor. Not just on stage, not just on set, but in life. God bless you and thank you.